Very much. My name is Sharon, and put some papers on your tables next to the wall, and one of them is from the campaign Yes I'm 37 to label genetically modified food, and the other one is my resource list. These are some of the resources I used for the talk today. I couldn't fit them all on there, so if you want more, I can email them to you, but this is a good start for you if you're not familiar with this topic. Also, the tomatoes that are on the table are non-GMO tomatoes grown in my garden, so help yourself to tomato while you're here. And then if you happen to have a number 4 in the corner of the resource list, if there's any leftover tomatoes on your table, you get to take those home with you. So there's 2 4s, should be 2 4s at a table. I was originally going to give them as door prizes, so that people were eating them, which is just great. But there's enough for everyone, so help yourself. And I also want to say that this is my research, this is what I've learned. Most of the time when I've been educating people about organic versus non-GMO food, it's been based on my health. When I quit eating conventional foods, I was able to get off all those prescription medications. So when I knew I was going to give this talk about a month ago, I started doing real research where, before I'd heard terms, I didn't understand them. And so it was kind of like a blur as to exactly what this is all about. So over the last month, I have been researching and learning, and so I'm going to try and relay some basic, where there were terms that I needed more clarification on. I'm going to try and share that with you today so that what I share with you is not a blur as well. So I'm going to try and do my best at that. So today we're going to cover what genetically modified foods are, what is a GMO, what does genetically engineered mean, a brief history on Monsanto, the California ballot initiative, Proposition 37, that we should be getting our absentee ballots any day now. And for the November election, it will be on the ballot, and some strategies to avoid genetically engineered food. So in the last month, I came across a documentary by Jeffrey Smith called Genetic Roulette. And in that documentary is kind of like the first time I really got it. So a lot of things that I'm going to share with you today stem from the information that he provided in that documentary. And it is for sale on his website, which I've got on my resource list. However, I did find it on YouTube yesterday, so if you want to check it out for free, you should be able to find it there as well.
Sharon, would you repeat the name of it?
Genetic Roulette.
Bye. Who did it?
Jeffrey Smith.
First one on the resource list.
Yes, it's on the resource list. So what is a GMO? GMO stands for genetically modified organism. You'll also hear the term genetically engineered. Genetically engineered food, genetically modified food, it all means the same thing. So you'll hear it intermixed like that. Then our food supply, the majority of our food supply in America has now been genetically engineered. It started in the 1990s here in America because genetic scientists said that when they genetically engineered our food, it gave it more nutrition. So proceeded in that regard. That's never been proven to be true, by the way. So genetic engineering now is the largest food experiment in the history of the world. And we've gone from food in its original whole state to food that's undergoing a scientific experiment, and we are the guinea pigs. It's frightening to eat a piece of corn nowadays. Most people that don't really understand what this is all about, they'll hear their friends that are tuned into it a little bit more saying, don't eat corn. So I'm going to explain to you a little more today what's happening with our food sources. So the practice of genetically engineering began in 1953 after scientists understood how DNA worked. and they learned how to select genes and in one plant or animal and then transfer them to another. Most of the terms, as I shared, I'm going to explain a little bit more because that one might have went past you a little bit from several of the resources that gave me a better understanding of what genetically engineering actually is. The DNA is the blueprint of genetic information for the individuality of an organism. The organism relies upon the information stored in its DNA for the management of every chemical reaction it has. DNA is the shape of that double spiral that looks like a ladder.
Helix.
Double helix. Helix means spiral. So that's what DNA is. And then the segments of DNA, which have been associated with specific features or functions of the organism, are called genes. And genes hold the information to build and maintain the organism's cells. They pass genetic traits to offspring, like your hair color, number of limbs. It will also let, if there's any specific diseases, that's where that gets passed on as well. So gene engineers from all over the world started reprogramming genetic material. They started inserting, rearranging, splicing, and editing genetic material. And it's gotten to the point where animal genes and even human genes are being randomly inserted into the chromosome of plants now, fish and animals. As an example, they'll put spider genes into goats so that the goats will produce a protein in their milk that makes a good material for bulletproof vests. There's human genes growing in rice right now in Kansas. They're going to be used for pharmaceutical purposes. So they swap genes between the normal species barrier that have never normally mated. Its basic genetic code is permanently altered when that happens. This creates new organisms in nature, some that never existed before. We're not a part of the evolutionary process, so it's kind of a roulette as to what comes out. So then they take the gene and they make millions of copies of it. And who is they? Well, today we're going to talk about Monsanto. They are the leading producer of genetically engineered seed and the pesticides associated with it. So for genetically engineered food, the process is geared towards swapping genes with the herbicide or pesticide that Monsanto produces. Monsanto is a company that now markets seeds to grow corn, soybeans, and other crops genetically modified to resist herbicides and pesticides. So the genes are then put into a gene gun, and in their laboratories, they inject modified genes into millions of cells. Then they put a virus in the mix called a promoter, which turns on different genes in the organism. Then those cells are cloned into a plant. When they do this, there's hundreds and thousands of mutations up and down the DNA. So just think of that twisted helix, that double helix. And when that happens, hundreds and thousands of genes can change their expression. And when that's done, that plant has mutations in genes that may overproduce an allergen, toxin, carcinogen, anti-nutrient, and regulators that block other genes. So the natural gene sequence of a plant now has a modified gene sequence and is foreign. It does not exist in nature. Genetically engineered food contains substances that have never been part of the human food supply. When we eat genetically engineered food, whether it be corn or soy or whatever food, our immune system looks at that genetic material and says, what is it? I've never seen this before. It doesn't exist in nature. It's foreign. And our immune system attacks it. This creates an inflammatory response in our bodies. So is there any surprise in learning that genetically engineered foods